welcome to this episode of Authentic Achievements, where I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by the fabulous Tara Halliday. Tara, welcome.
Thank you very much, Kim. Delighted to be here.
Oh, I'm so excited to have you on, and so looking forward to our conversation, which I know we always get really stuck in and carried away. So before we do that, I'm going to just share a little bit more about you with our audience who haven't had the pleasure of knowing you like I do. So Tara is a world-class imposter syndrome coach. She guides high-achieving leaders to eliminate imposter syndrome and develop energy, focus, calm, resilience, and effortless confidence. Tara brings a practical and scientific approach to helping high performers reach their highest potential. She has over 20 years experience as a qualified holistic therapist. She's a certified coach and a certified neurofeedback trainer and has a PhD in engineering. She's the author of Amazon #1 bestsellers, Unmasking, The Coach's Guide to Imposter Syndrome from 2018, and Outsmart Imposter Syndrome in 2023. Her mission and passion are to free high achievers and leaders from unnecessary internal suffering so they can live a happy, meaningful, and successful life. Wow, what an amazing calling for your life to be able to help, because when we're in the throes of imposter syndrome, it's debilitating, isn't it? We can get ourselves into such trouble. But before we dig into that, can you share with us a little bit more about your journey? Because that's a fascinating route that you've been on, engineering through to author.
You know, it seems odd. I think there's a step before it, and I think that's where the difference is. When I was a teenager and people's careers counselors were saying, well, what would you like to do? I wanted to be a psychologist. My family didn't want me to be a psychologist. They said, you've got to do something that, be a computer systems analyst. Okay. And I got into engineering because I could, I liked science and I could. And I had a 10-year career in engineering and the PhD, as you mentioned, before I finally escaped back to what I really, really wanted to do. And that was the therapies. That was my first step. And that was started in the year 2000, actually. It's 24 years ago now. Yeah. Wow. So, and from there, everything's just narrowed. So I was working as a therapist with all sorts of clients with all sorts of stressful situations, and most of them it helped. Some people kept coming back. Oh no, that's not the point. I'm not meant to be a crutch, right? I'm meant to be a catalyst to help. So I started digging into why. Why did they keep coming back? And I eventually got to that it was about the beliefs they were holding. Mm-hmm. And okay, now maybe I can put that more into my work. I found this incredible framework and coaching practice around unconditional worth, which has been identified as the root cause of all human suffering, right? When it's conditional. So unconditional worth, trained in that. And then as I was working with clients in that, one of my clients said, is this imposter syndrome? And I said, I don't know. I haven't heard of imposter syndrome. So of course I Googled it, looked it up. And I saw that all the symptoms of conditional worth, the stuff that makes us suffer, is exactly the same as the symptoms of imposter syndrome. So that was my big light bulb moment. Oh my gosh, I can see there we've got the root cause of imposter syndrome. So this is why it's so hard to address imposter syndrome, because people are trying to look at the symptoms and solve that. But actually it's the root cause. So I just got narrower and narrower my focus. So now I've been working exclusively with people with imposter syndrome for the last eight years, I think. 8 years, yes.
Wow. Because I think, it comes up for so many people, doesn't it? And like you say, it's back to that. I always call it like kind of that my personal operating system. So, we kind of create that at 7, I think, and we enforce it at 14 and we embed it at 21. And if we don't go back and look at it, it inadvertently drives the rest of our life and the rest of our choices. And
I love that time scale. What's interesting is that the belief that your worth is conditional gets developed between the ages of 18 months and 3 years old. So it precedes and all the rest of our framework. So it means that framework that we're developing, our operating system at the age of 7, already has this idea embedded, this belief embedded in it, and you know, follows it. And that's why it's, again, something that unless you know what it is and you know how to shift it, it's not going to move, because it's rock solid in there.
That's it. And it's not conscious, is it? It's in our subconscious. So we're not aware of it. And for me, you know, I liken it these days. It's taken me a long time to get there, but I liken it these days to, you know, I'm 51. So if I think that operating system got finalized at 21, it's 30 years old. That's 30 years worth of bugs and misinformation. And you wouldn't let your phone or your computer run on such outdated software. So why do we not go back and kind of update our own personal operating system? So, like you, I've spent the last probably 7 or 8 years really digging into, for me, mine started with, why am I doing to myself what I'm doing to myself? Why have I developed this belief system? And actually, unless I unpick it and create a better one, I'm going to inadvertently create scarlets in the same flawed manner that I've created my own. And so for me, that was my driver, was if I can understand and update mine, I can learn from that what I can do for her to make sure that, she's 7 now, to make sure that actually we're building her the very best operating system that we possibly can.
I love that. And you know, I do often get asked, you know, by people, they hear about imposter syndrome, which, for those who don't know, is the secret feeling of being a fraud when you're not a fraud, and the fear of being found out. So it's you don't really connect with and access your success. So when people realize that imposter syndrome is prevalent in their life, they realize that they're modeling it for their children. And so the next thing they do is they say, okay, can you fix my kids? Can you make sure they and it's very natural. Yes, of course you want to do that. But I will take a step back. The way to influence your child is to be a different role model. So you get rid of imposter syndrome, and then your child is not going to have it either. And that's the way through. So there's no skipping the parents.
No, I mean, one of the things I do with Scarlett is make sure that I'm kind of reminding her of the belief piece. And when I catch her in one of those moments, when they come back, and children are quite fatalistic often, and things like you come back, oh, I can't colour, it's like, let's just have a look at that. So let's have a look at, how much better was your colouring today than yesterday? Oh, it was actually, Mummy, it's better. Okay. And how much better was your colouring yesterday than this one from last year? Oh, Mummy, it's much better. How do you feel about colouring now? I'm getting good at it, aren't I? I think so. So her kind of make the steps, but just pointers to go, well, let's just anchor it back into how far you've come, but let you do that. Because it's got to be your thinking, your decision, where you come from, hasn't it, for us to really get that to fix. What you can't do is go and try and distance her from the label. It's like, you're not naughty. You might have made a naughty choice, but the beauty of choice is the minute you make a choice that doesn't serve you, you can make a brand new choice. It's like, we're not stuck with it. And I think I'm hoping that some of those will help her to have the inner resilience to become her own best friend rather than become her own worst enemy. And having spent probably nearly 40 odd years of my life being my own worst enemy, it's not a nice place to be, is it?
And you do wish so much better for your kids. And I would say that it's also your worth, as in adults, we are worth having our own happier lives and not being driven by this belief. I mean, you hinted at it there, that the conditional worth is belief, is the belief that who you are means, what you do means who you are. So you do something good, you are good. You do something bad, you are bad. And that is why, that has been identified back in the 1950s as the root cause of all human suffering. Back then, we didn't know we could change. We didn't know that the brain had neuroplasticity, we could change beliefs. We didn't know any of that. Neuroscience has moved on, and now we know if we do things in a very specific way, we can work with our brain the way the brain actually, the hardware of the brain, if you like, work with that and actually change these beliefs on a very permanent basis. And that for me, it's so powerful. And that's why I'm, so excited about the work that I do, 8 years in, and I'm still like it.
Imagine, I mean, I know for me it was life-changing once I realized I could change the beliefs that didn't serve me. And I do get to do a little bit of that with clients. Although I do a very different thing to you, it crops in. You suddenly get there and go, oh, okay. So actually, the issue is you don't feel worthy. You don't feel like you should be doing this, and that's what's causing all of these symptoms to crop up in why you're procrastinating in your business, or why you're not making the tough calls when you need to, or when you're not taking enough risk, or it kind of drives a lot of what comes out in kind of that business growth piece. But it is fascinating, isn't it, what we do to ourselves and how plausible that voice is. I think for me that was the real kicker, was when I had to own up that I was the thing that had got in my way all of the years, and take some accountability for that, and then change it, because other than that, until then, I hadn't actually regained control of not only my worth but my power, because I was still being a victim to what had gone on. And now I look at it and go, I'm not a victim of my circumstance. I'm a product of my choice, because in every circumstance I have a choice. I may not have many choices, but I have a choice. And if I take control of that choice and do the one that works best, then it helps you to start to rewrite the future, doesn't it? It's like, we are all the author of our own lives, and sometimes we need to take back the pen.
I love what you said about the rewriting, and the responsibility. Like, I am responsible for my choices. I think one of the things where areas we can be a bit more gentle with ourselves and say, and that original belief is not our fault. All of us, all of society teaches us this, that your worth depends on what you do. You see, we've recently had the Olympics, and of course, some people were dissatisfied with silver, right? As if it made them a bad person. Then it doesn't make you a bad person, right? All of that. But it's so prevalent in society. The very first step in change is recognizing it. So we talked earlier about it being an unconscious belief. When we become aware of it, when you suddenly realize what's going on, and all of society has kind of misled you, then it's not something to beat yourself up for. It's something to notice, and when you notice it, then you can do well. If there's something you can do about it, then you can act and you can change it. And that is the most empowering position to be in, when you're changing what you've always been taught, and that, as you say, doesn't serve you. And
it's funny, there's so many. I was talking about this on a recent podcast, actually. There's so many phrases that I grew up with that actually are just wrong. Wrong. So things like sticks and stones will break our bones, but names will never hurt us. And yet now we understand the power of the brain. We know just the impact that what we say to ourselves and others can have. And one of my favorites was, "You've made your bed, you've got to lie in it." Well, it's your bed. Get out and make it again. You don't have to stick with that choice for life. You can make the choice. And I think, like you say, there's a lot of the societal pressures that allow us to feel like things are conditional. It's like, I know with Scarlett, if I ever have to tell her off about something, I always remind her that you remember, I love you always. I might not like what you've done, and we might need to deal with the consequences of that, but I love you always. Because when I grew up incorrectly, having created a belief that love was conditional on me being perfect.
Yes,
that was my childlike view of the world. Whereas now I realise the love's unconditional. That doesn't mean to say you're never going to get told off or held to account for making choices that aren't appropriate.
Yeah.
So with Scully, I try and make sure I always reinforce, I love you always.
Yes.
I don't like this. We need to do something different. Let me explain why I don't like this, or it's going to harm you, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But so that hopefully she doesn't ever make one attached to the other,
Yes.
and then have to go back and unpick it all, like I did later on in life. Because we do, don't we? We find we love a label. To label everything. And I know what it is, and I'm not on my own because everybody else has got a label like it, and that can be really beneficial, but it can also be really harmful, can't it?
Yeah, you were talking about the operating system that we install by the age of 7. Well, a lot of that is the brain mapping out what everything means and gives a label to everything. And children around that age, they're asking for labels. Tell me how I'm different from my siblings. Tell me how tell me what are my qualities. We're trying to define ourselves. It's the brain trying to refine how to represent the world. Yeah. So it's a very what I'm keen with the people that I work with is that they don't feel like it's their fault. Like there's not to blame, and it's not their parents' fault. So we're not going to therapy and blaming parents here, because their parents were taught the same thing. Right? How would they know? I mean, it's like learning another language. If your parents never learned it, and you never learned it anywhere else in your environment, how can you expect to know that language? Right? Only
by osmosis, are you? Because that broadly near somebody. Well, listen, I was a genius, and it's though. I sometimes find when I'm chatting to my mum, and she's like, I've not thought of it that way. She went, well, I didn't do that, and I went, no, but you didn't study it either. I've spent years studying it, so I know it purely because I got taught it.
Yes.
You get taught it, to your point, Tara. If you didn't get taught it, how on earth are you possibly ever supposed to know? And so we're just doing the best that we can with the hand that we've been dealt, and each generation is trying to fix the bit they learned. Because we learn something on the journey, don't we? And we go, I'm not going to do that bit with mine. I'm going to do bits with mine, but I'm not going to do that bit with mine. But before we go inward, and I think for me that was one of my hardest things to do, was to go in, because I didn't like myself very much. So going inward and spending more time was a terrifying thought. It'd be much better to be out here with all these lovely people that weren't imperfect. But actually I realized I'd got to go in and understand how I viewed myself, because that was the only place I was going to change. Because it didn't matter how many external accolades you got or awards you won or anything else, because that wasn't changing the voice inside. Because you'd still say things like, I would still say, well, if only they knew. If only they knew. They knew what I knew, then they wouldn't be doing this. And for me, one of my big breakthrough moments was, I remember suddenly hearing myself saying that, well, if only they knew this. And I thought, hold on a minute. So these people that you really admire, that you aspire to be like, that you would love to be a tenth as good as, are telling you that you're really good at this particular thing. And you're convinced that your opinion that you're wrong, so your opinion that they're wrong is better and more valid than their opinion that they're right.
Yeah.
That makes no sense, because I don't think my opinion's worth anything, to be fair. But at the time, so why on earth would I dismiss their opinion that I aspire to be like and cling on to my own? That makes no sense. And so my start of my journey was I started borrowing their opinion. I go, well, if they believe I can do it, I'm going to borrow their belief, do my best not to prove them wrong. It's like, and that helped me on the start of that journey, until I realized it only takes you so far. And actually what you've got to go is the next bit, is to go inward and go, how do I change that belief? How do I dismantle that table? Because in my head, how our belief system works is we have a belief, and then every time something else happens, it becomes another leg on the table of belief until we've got the most stable table we're ever going to have. And we think that's never going to move because it's like it's rock solid. But what we have to do is create a new table over here, don't we? Start pull the legs and move them over. And for me, that felt very daunting, but it was also so liberating once you had done it, and once you'd gone back and kind of looked at it from a different angle, been a bit more curious about, why am I so convinced I'm right? Why am I so convinced that's wrong? What else might be playing into this that I've not considered or I've not reflected on?
That's such a powerful process to go through. I think the difficulty with that process is always, well, how do I do this? How do I change this belief? And it feels like, it's like how long's a piece of string? It feels like it's either never ending, or it feels like it's just too far open-ended. You've no idea even where to start. And that exact point was the reason that I developed my inner success program, which is a very structured program. There's 8 steps. We go step by step. There's exercises to do each one, and each one we're systematically dismantling the old belief, taking down the old legs, and building in ones that actually genuinely support it, and all the while using neuroscience and how the brain works as our guide to how to do this. So it goes from being something nebulous and a bit scary, to go in and redefine yourself, like you say, is some people find it very uncomfortable to do. But when you have a process and you can just follow the steps in the process, then it's so much easier, and it's so much more, because the steps are backed up by science. It's reproducible, so you get the same result time after time after time. Now I focus solely on one belief, so I'm not rewriting personalities or anything like that, and that's not the point of it at all. But this one belief is one of these cornerstones to, it's probably the imposter syndrome is probably the biggest block to success there is. It affects over 70% of high achievers at some point in their careers, and some studies say even more than that.
And I think I read similar. I read that actually 70% of us globally at any one point will suffer a little bit of imposter syndrome, and always. It's always good to know that you're in good company. So for me, the fact that Einstein had it, so he had a quote which I'm going to butcher, so forgive me, but something along the lines of the esteem within which my works are held leave me feeling like an unlikely swindler. So even Einstein, globally respected as a genius. And people that you wouldn't expect. So both Eminem and Justin Bieber have got songs where they talk about imposter syndrome, and then in it. So even people that are outwardly super confident and look like they never doubt themselves for a second. Doesn't matter how confident we look externally, it can still be eating us up inside, can't it?
Yes, and it can lead to burnout and people destroying careers. It's a very, very stressful and very serious issue, and you can't out-succeed imposter syndrome. There's always the idea that, oh well, if I just get to the next level, then I'll start feeling good about myself. All right, if I get to the next landmark in whatever I put, then maybe I'll feel better. So this is where people get driven to achieve more and more and more and more. And they never get there. And this is why, Einstein at the top of their field, those singers at the top of their fields, actors at the top of their fields, in every industry and every area of achievement, you can't outrun this, because it's a belief, it's an internal belief.
It's in you, isn't it? That's why you've got to go inward to it. So it's like, no matter what changes outwardly, inwardly you're still there.
Right.
You're still going. You're still turning up to
wherever you go, there you are.
That's it. You can't outrun yourself. I think for me that was my breakthrough moment, which is I'm going to be with me for the rest of my life. So either I learn to like myself, or I'm going to be pretty darn miserable in those moments of solitude, because you're with somebody you don't want to spend any time with, and that's a bit sad.
It is, and people think that if they go inward, they might discover that they really aren't worthwhile and they really aren't good enough. It's going to have to somehow prove that, so they'd rather not go there. And I've worked with a lot of executives, and I can guarantee that there is nobody who's ever found that because it's a false premise. So you're not going to find the truth of a false premise.
No, and I think that I love that, because we believe the things we say about ourselves, and we believe other people think them too. So I know for many years, I would externalize my awful things I said about myself and go, well, they might think this, or they'll think that, or think the other, or think. Never asked anybody. It's not stupid to ask anybody. And then I was given an exercise where I had to go and ask people, friends, family, and colleagues, as part of my development, and say, I really need you to be honest. I really want to work on developing myself. Could you tell me 1 or 2 things that you think are my strengths, and 1 or 2 things where you think I get in my own way? When the feedback came back, it was almost unanimous. My strengths were brave and fearless. And I was like, I don't really get that. I live in fear every minute of every day. Fear that I'm going to be found out. Fear that people are going to realise that I'm just a hairdresser and I shouldn't be here really. I shouldn't be doing these things, or whatever script was going on in my head. And so I said, could you just help me? I don't get it. Could you just explain in a bit more detail? And they were like, Kim, you will literally up sticks and move somewhere where you know nobody for a job you're not 100% convinced you can do. And I was like, And they said, well, we think that's brave and fearless. And I went, interesting. I thought you all thought I was flighty and a little bit stupid. But so I've been playing my life on the fact that's what you think of me, where in reality I have to own up and go, that's what I think of me.
Yeah.
And therefore the opinion I need to change is in here. And it's therefore chasing I used to be like a course junkie. I've got more certificates and qualifications than I know what to do with. Because I was like, well, if I could just learn one more thing, then that would be okay. But it was never okay, because I wasn't changing that belief that was following me wherever I went. I was just plastering the cracks with another certification.
It's that stretch. I mean, that never feeling like you quite have enough qualifications in particular. Sometimes it's money or possessions, but often it's qualifications. That's a classic symptom of imposter syndrome. Yeah, and you're absolutely right. You can have this great long list, and it will never prove to yourself that you're good enough. It cannot, but you still have this urge. Well, if I just got one more, maybe that'll suit. So this is you just repeating the same solution over and over, and hope that an imposter syndrome will go away eventually. And that's, as a strategy, not bad in other areas of life, but in terms of imposter syndrome, it will never solve the problem. So that's the unfortunate part of it. But when you realize that, and you realize, oh, this urge that I have to get another course is a symptom of stress. Right? It is me trying to find a solution to the stress that I'm under. When you realize that's it, it's like, okay, so it's really not about the course at all. It's for me, I'm under massive stress and I'm desperate to find a solution. Now you say, choices. Now you can go, now you can open up what your options are, because you know what the real problem is. And the real problem isn't just getting another course certificate.
Yeah, I love that, because very often in life, as you pointed out so eloquently earlier on, so often in life we're busy fixing symptoms instead of understanding what the cause is. And then all that happens is they pop up somewhere else. You're like, hello? Why are you over here? So I think it is. It's that understanding first that that there is it's your belief system that needs an upgrade. And for me, the reason I always use that language of it's a system that uses an upgrade. Nobody builds a system expecting it to be flawed. Nobody wants it to be flawed. Nobody purposefully puts the bugs in there. They're there because they did the best that they could with the information at the time. And therefore, when we go and do an upgrade and we start fixing those bugs, there's no blame to be attached to any of those, either from the original developer or from the operator themselves, because it wasn't the intention that they turned up. It was the impact that they're there. It's the impact we've got to deal with. But the intention was always honourable. The intention was always to do the right thing. And for me, that's helped me to go and address those bits where you go, well, I don't really want to go down that route, because what if that means I'm ending up saying it was my family's fault, or it was somebody else's, and I don't believe that. I don't believe that. I don't want to believe that either. Once I realised that's not the case, what you're saying is everyone did the best they could with the information they knew at the time. We now have better information. We upgrade it and make it work for us. That became something that I was much more able to embrace wholeheartedly, because it didn't come with guilt, either of self or of loved ones.
Yes, and I think that's so important, that not blaming. Right? There is an innocence to this belief. We took it on as innocent children, and we didn't know. Our parents taught us as innocent because they were never taught, and their parents. It goes all the way back, and I don't even know how far back it goes. I don't think we can even say, because it's pervasive. And unless we're specifically taught to separate out our actions from our worth, then the default that the vast majority of humans have is that they're the same. And that's the problem right there. But you're right, nobody's fault. There's no to blame. And if you go in with that, then it's easier to walk through this journey, because you know that it's not going to condemn you or blame anyone else.
I love that. I could chat to you all day, but I'm very you've already shared some amazing insight. Could you end, before you let people know how to get in touch with you, with what's the one thing that if you could go back and give your younger self some advice, what would it be?
You know what? There's this lovely song. There's a band called Hillsong, and they've got this song called "Dear Younger Me." And it's exactly that. If I knew then what I know now, what would I tell myself? And their words were, "It's not your fault." And for me, that's a very, very powerful statement. I mean, I'd probably elaborate a bit more, right? That you have this belief that your worth depends on who you are, but it doesn't. When you were born, you were an absolute miracle. Right? You didn't need to do anything. You didn't need to earn anybody's a favor or anything like that. You were totally lovable, totally worthy, and nothing's changed. You as a human being, you are still that person, and what you do can never affect it. And that would have set me free. And that sets everyone free when they get to that.
Oh, I love that. And I must admit, my little girl, poor soul, is literally the spitting image of me when I was the same age. In fact, she saw a picture the other day and she went, "Mummy, it's me." And I was like, "I never dressed you like that." I was wearing some awful 1970s outfit. And I was like, just no. But for me, that makes it much easier, because when I look at her and I see her near pictures of me, it is like talking to your younger self. I wish I knew then. I can hopefully share with her now and go, right, don't believe these ones. I wish I knew that we are always enough, and there's nothing we can't do if we're willing to try. So I love that. I know you're right. It would set you free. So how can people get in touch with you? What do they get in touch with you about?
Right. Okay. Well, so the work that I do is one-to-one work with business owners, leaders, executives, and take them through a one-to-one my specific program called Inner Success to get rid of imposter syndrome and jumpstart them. So that's the work that I do. What I'm doing right now is I'm actually doing a research project. So I've got this fantastic program, if I can say that myself, with all honesty. It gets amazing results. In fact, it gets better results than any other published approach to imposter syndrome. So I'm very proud of it. So I've worked with people, and I've trained another coach to work with people, and they all get consistently excellent results. I've been challenged now, say, okay, is this just because you're a brilliant coach? Is this, I need to prove that it's reproducible with the same system with any facilitator. So I'm training up 30 coaches to facilitate my program. And for those coaches, I need case study clients. And the case study clients, they'll still get one-to-one, and I'll be supervising them. They're experienced coaches, so they get the whole inner success transformation that's doing so well. But because it's research, I'm trying to make it as cheap as possible. So it's really, really cheap. It's £975 plus VAT, which is 13% of what an executive would pay. Is very small. So this is starting. The doors open on the 1st of September, so we're very close. We'll be starting the actual program in the middle of October. So if you're over 33, this is the research program that's demographic. So if you're over 33 and you're in a leadership, business owner, managerial role, and you want to get rid of imposter syndrome, then if you go to my website, which is outsmartimpostersyndrome.com, go to my website and you can click on that and take a look at the details and see if it's right for you. And we were talking about being aware and then taking action. So this is the taking action part of it.
Perfect. And I will make sure in the show notes below, we will have all of the ways to contact Tara, and also a link to that case study group and all the social media. Tara, it's been a joy as always. Thank you so very much for coming on and sharing such wisdom and insight into something that affects so many people. So thank you so much.
Absolute pleasure, Kim. This has been great, and a brilliant conversation with you, I have to say. It's been fun.
Bless you. Thank you so much. And for everybody watching and listening, until next time, take care.